All right. It's all you, Dave. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Jason. And I want to say welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking a Friday night and hanging out with us for an hour to do some school finance school. I was just looking at the chat and saying hi to everyone, and we've got a really great representation, people from all over the country. So shout outs to Georgia, Massachusetts, California, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, and Wisconsin and North Carolina. So I'm just super pumped. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to give a little presentation with some of the big ideas that we want to work with here. And then we're going to get into a kind of tools workshop kind of mode. All right. Oh, and it looks like we have Tennessee also. Okay, great. So just a second. Okay. Excuse me. All right, you should be able to see my screen there. Just trying to move you all over. All right. So what I wanted to do was just make a few points so we can think about this stuff together a little. I'm going to be talking about something called the equality of intelligence. I'm going to talk about the world of finance versus the world of us, and then toxic finance versus healthy school finance, which is what we're here to do. Then we're going to go over something called a Healthy School Finance Worksheet, which is a tool that we've come up with for people to start doing their own kind of analysis of the school finance situation that they're dealing with in your district. And we're going to do some guided practice. So I'm going to show you how to find some debt numbers on a district that I got a request to do. And boy, I haven't had the time to do it. Things have been super busy. But I'll show you how to look for the debt numbers in particular because they can be hard to find. And then I'm calling the last part of this the studio AMA. That is to say, ask me anything, but on the call altogether, I'll want you to try to work on your district and put questions that you have in the chat, and I'll try to answer some in real time. Okay, so that's where we're headed. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is this thing called the equality of intelligence. I like to think about this because before we get into the numbers, we got to think about the numbers and what the numbers sort of do to us and make us feel. Um, there's this guy Joseph Jacotot. He's an educator from 19th century France, but he um, he had this idea called the equality of intelligence, that when we assume the equality of intelligence, education and learning are liberatory. But what does that mean? It means that even though there might be inequalities of knowledge, we might all know different things. There might be inequality of time and resources and money. We're all equally intelligent. We can all learn things. We can all make meaning. We can all see things. We can all make stuff of what we see, and we can think about that. And when we look at financial documents, when we think about school finance, when we think about debt and these numbers, they have this power, this oppressive power, and it makes us feel like we don't know. And not only that, we can't know. It's that we feel like we just can't know this stuff and somebody else knows it, and wow, I hope they'll deal with it. Somebody do something kind of thing. But no, everyone's equally intelligent, and it's very important to assume that equality of intelligence when looking at financial documents, okay? And there's some insights that Jacotot had that I like to mention. The first insight here is that everything is in everything, which means that when you start to drill down into the tiniest little detail, insignificant little detail, actually you start to unearth everything else. And so it's okay to go down rabbit holes. It's okay to feel kind of confused and just start going through details, because it's in the going through of these details and that you can uncover everything. There were three questions that Jacotot liked to ask. And these three questions are something that I like to tell people about. I use them in my own practice. When you encounter a financial document that you're trying to make sense of, ask yourself three questions. What do you see? What do you make of it? What do you think about it? And then repeat. And it doesn't matter if you don't know anything about school finance, if you don't know anything about public finance, if you don't know anything about municipal bonds or taxes or pensions or what have you. If you see something, you make something of it, you think something about it, and repeat. and you just start learning. And it's sort of an amazing method. And I'm just going to give you an example that I like to tell people about. This is a picture of an Italian poem. So I had a friend, and Jason's now heard me say this story so many times, it's boring, but um, I had a friend who, we were talking about this equality of intelligence thing, and he was like, I don't really buy that. How could everyone be equally intelligent? I study medieval Italian poetry, and like you couldn't make heads or tails of that. You don't study that. And I'm like, well, do you happen to have a copy of a poem that you're working on around? And he happened to because he was teaching something. He pulled it out, and I said, listen, give me 10 minutes with this poem, and see what I can do with it. And I just did this method, right? I just said, I can see, I can think, I can make things of what I see. And I just started circling. I started underlining. I started making connections and guesses and asking questions. Is this word that? Is that word this? And then there are all these different marks and what these marks could mean. And after 10 minutes, I showed it to him and he was like, yeah, I mean, you don't know it medieval Italian, but you were starting to make something of this poem. And it was I framed this poem and it's hanging up in my office because it's sort of a testament or a memory, of this method. And I think when approaching financial documents, that's how I approach them. I was a terrible math student. I failed, and I got so intimidated by numbers. And part of the reason why I do this to some degree is almost a revenge on the numbers, because actually that intimidation is how they keep stuff from us and how the systems continue to be perpetuated and rather than transformed. Okay. So we don't get a lot of opportunities to talk about art when it comes to school finance, and I'd like to, use more literary and art kinds of artistic kinds of images. And this image is called the Red Wedge, and it actually comes from the time of the Russian Revolution. And the reason why I wanted to use this image is because in philosophy of finance, there's a distinction between the world of finance and the world of us. The world of finance is a world of numbers. It's two-dimensional and it's very dry and it's all cut up and diced up. But that world of finance is parasitic on our world. It takes from us, it needs us to be able to continue to exist, but it's not always giving back to us. And what we want to do is we want to be the red wedge, making an incursion into the world of finance from the world of us. So you see how this triangle is getting into that circle? It seems like it's supposed to be a closed circle. This red wedge is making an incursion. It's going inside. It's the world of us going into the world of finance. And I just wanted to give us this image, that, we shouldn't be intimidated. We're making an incursion into a world that's parasitic and takes from us. But now we want to get into that world and, start to make sense of it so that we can change it. Okay, so what are we trying to change exactly? I wanted to put some research on the table here, the research that I've done on debt and also school finance. And this is a paper called Toxic Finance: Underinvestment in Philadelphia's School Buildings, 1993 to 2021. Now, what me and Kamika Royal did was we calculated the amount of interest on debt that the school district of Philadelphia accrued and had to pay between 1993 and 2021, as well as the cost of issuance on the municipal bond market. Now, when a school district needs to fix its facilities, it needs to go into debt. It needs to sell a loan and make itself an investment product on Wall Street to big banks and to wealthy investors who the school district has to pay back with interest, relatively high interest rates. We calculated that between these years, the school district of Philadelphia paid $3.6 billion in interest on the debt. And the interest, again, is just the amount of money that the loan costs. So it's not just paying back the loan. 3.6 billion is just the interest that had to be paid on that loan. And the 145 million there, that's just the costs of doing the deal, paying credit raters, paying lawyers, paying consultants, and the like. And the significance of the 3.6 billion there historically is that in 2017, the school district of Philadelphia had an independent assessment of its facilities, and it was found to have at least $4.5 billion deferred maintenance cost. So that means that the deferred maintenance, the maintenance on the buildings that wasn't getting done, that should have been done, that wasn't done, that was worth about $4.5 billion. In this period, they paid $3.6 billion just in interest to be able to get the money to fix up their buildings. Okay. And so that's what we mean when we say toxic finance. Toxic finance is the finance behind toxic facilities, behind toxic infrastructure, but behind infrastructure that doesn't serve us. And so in Philadelphia, there was a big, special focus on toxic schools. And so this is a claim that we make that it is toxic finance. And another aspect of bonds, when some research that I've done that I just want put some numbers out there. This is published research all recently within this year, by the way. Now, this is a bunch of numbers, but I'm going to explain what this means. Some researchers and I were interested. So when a school district has to take out this bond, has to take out a loan and pay it back with interest, we were wondering whether or not the districts that have more white students don't have to pay as much interest, don't have to have as high borrowing costs. And it turns out we did a national study with panel data over a long period of time, many school districts. We found that for every 1% increase in white students, you get a decrease in your interest rate by 0.3%. And we called that a white interest discount. And to us, that meant that the municipal bond market, it's racist. So it's not just that they're getting charged a lot. It's that they're charging more to districts with diverse working class student populations. And in high racial animus areas, we found that it's a 1-to-1. So for every 1% increase of white students that you have, you get a 1% discount on your interest rate. And 1% discount on your interest rate is huge. Everyone who knows, pays a mortgage, pays a student loan, that those interest rates matter. Every little basis point matters. And so we found that there's a lot going on here. Now, the one caveat in this piece of research that's interesting to note is that after a certain threshold of whiteness, the borrowing costs go way up. And our sort of a conclusion there is that actually, like the rural white poorer school districts have really high borrowing costs too. And so you have to be the right kind of white to be able to get this white interest rate discount. This is the toxic finance that we're dealing with here. So whenever people say in the municipal bond market, oh, well, we're providing liquidity for public investment, we're actually the good guys. This market it's shot through with racism, and it costs way too much. Okay, so that's what we mean by toxic finance. And here's a funny picture of me, but I've been on going to TikTok and talking about school district finance, from this perspective. Okay, thinking about how the ways in which the school districts are sort of networked with Wall Street and private property and racism, racial capitalism and stuff is wrong, but talking about the details. And it's sort of surprising, but I've found a little following there, and I get requests to look at school districts. And so, this is a Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Public Schools from last week, a screenshot. And people just started asking me to do these school district analyses over and over again. And I've been doing those, but as Jason mentioned, I also have this book coming out. And in this book, I go into a lot of details, and I sort of provide the framework and of how to think about all this stuff. So I wanted to mention that and put that out there. And I'll provide a link to all this stuff towards the end of the presentation. But I only want to talk for a few more minutes so that we can get to our studio AMA. So now what I want to do is I want to talk through this Healthy School Finance worksheet, which is a tool that we've created to try to help people. We're assuming the equality of intelligence. We want people to be able to get into these numbers, to start to analyze them themselves, And it's a tool to meant to start doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link into the chat. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so that everyone can have it. Just one moment while I do that. Okay. So I'll put a link into the chat here. You should be able to download that. So what I'd like you to do is download that so you have it on your desktop. And I'm going to go back to my presentation here, and I'm just going to walk people through the basics of this and just do one little tiny piece of it. So actually, let's just go to the thing itself, shall we? Okay, so here we have the Healthy School Finance worksheet, and you're going to find a few sections. I'm just going to talk you through these. There's first of all, so you don't need me to explain it, or you want to use these with groups or people that you know, or forward this along. There's step-by-step instructions with screenshots up here, and there's a link. And I'm going to talk about this later, because this call is only so long. We're going to stop at 9, but I set up a subreddit called School Budget BS, so that there could be a kind of rolling chat board on social media for people to ask questions and be talking and thinking about this asynchronously. And so there's a link to that as well. So the first section of this worksheet is mapping. And I like to map school districts before I say anything about them, because I want to know exactly what it is that we're dealing with here. And it's important to get the context, the demographics, the situation of this region of the school district. And because I think healthy school finance involves an engagement both with the climate crisis and with racial capitalism, we start by mapping climate threats in your school district to understand what's going on there. And you find these numbers, and you can actually find a total climate risk score. The next source is called Crossing the Line, which is a map from New America, where you can get the total number of students, the percent students of color, your percent white students, poverty rate, and median property value. And that's very important, because most maps don't include property value, but property value is the sort of basics of this whole situation. It's a lot of what is anchoring what makes it so unfair. The next thing you want to find is segregation between schools within the school district through the Segregation Explorer. And then we're going to want the total number of teachers in that district using the National Center for Education Statistics map, which I've used my whole career, and it's still up, but who knows with the federal government the way that it is now. Okay, so then you get a nice sense, a nice portrait of your school district. But then in the second half, we do what I call a financial document critique. And that's when we find two different documents that I think are important to work from when you're doing this analysis. The first document is called an audited financial statement, or an audited financial report, CAFR. And when you find that, we can look through and find all kinds of numbers here, like salary expenditure, instruction expenditure, debt service, interest in debt, and debt outstanding. And then you want to find a bond document. And that recent bond document is going to tell you all kinds of stuff about loans and debt and the interaction of the school district with Wall Street. Okay? The way that we find those documents, the way that I recommend we find those documents, is through Emma. And I'm just going to do a quick opening of Emma so that you can get a sense. There should be a link in here, but I guess there isn't. I'll put it in here. You go to emma.msrb.org. You'll have to accept some terms. I accepted them a long time ago. And then you search up here for your school district. Okay, and I'm going to give you an example, because I'm going to do this example for you, and then I'm going to give you, we're going to have like half an hour or so, and I'm going to give people an opportunity to do this on their own and ask questions, okay? I got a request to look at Evergreen, Washington state schools, and that is actually in Vancouver, Washington, in the northwest of Washington State. And so when I want to find documents that have to do with Evergreen, I want to find an audited financial statement, and I want to find a bond document. What I have to do, and this one was actually a little tricky. I put in Evergreen, Washington. Here we go. Evergreen School District number 114, Clark County, Washington. See that? Click on that. It brings us to a page. And this page has all kinds of stuff. Now, I want to direct you to a couple things. The first things you're going to see are a listing of bonds. And this is where you can find bond documents. So if we click on the first link there, and then we go to official statement, we get our bond document. And here we have a bond document right there. They're usually really, really long. But the next thing we want to do, go back, is we want to go to financial disclosures because we want to look for audited financial statements. And this EMMA is the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board's public-facing dashboard. Every entity that issues or is related to a public issuance of debt has to upload financial disclosure information into this website, according to the Security Exchange Commission. And so you can find up-to-date financial documents all here for your school district's page. Once you get to know EMMA a little bit, then you can get documents that you might otherwise have to, like FOIA, or you might not be able to find. It's all here because the school districts are borrowing money on Wall Street. Well, Wall Street wants to be sure that they're not, going to be defrauded. And so the school districts have to upload all this information to disclose all this information so that they can't be accused of fraud. So here we have, you see, annual financial information, audited financial statement. Now that's from 2023. You'll want to click on this PDF, and then you get financial statements for Evergreen School District, and that's what we're talking about. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our Healthy School Finance worksheet, and the information here in the financial document critique, that's where we're going to start to fill out these numbers. Okay, and I know maybe you're searching already. That's cool, and I'm going to ask for questions in the chat. I'm going to try to help people out. But I wanted to just call your attention to a couple numbers. The debt numbers can be a little tricky, but Control F is your best friend when you're doing this. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control F. My little search box will happen down here on the left because I use Firefox, and I'm going to search for the word debt. Now, okay. Oh, here we go. This one's set up a little differently than the one that I had before. It's sideways. But here, I'm going to go to a different one that I have. Okay. So once I searched for debt, it came up with 22 matches. I just clicked through, and then I clicked through until I started seeing some numbers. And here we have a balance of long-term debt as of 2023, $582.5 million. Now here's long-term debt at August 31st, 2024. And here they break it down by principal and interest. And not only that, they break down by bond how much principal and interest. And you get the total here. Total long-term bonded debt as of 24, $231 million in interest from all these bonds that the school district has taken out. So you'd want to plug that into your Healthy School Finance worksheet when you get total interest on debt. Now, if you want to search for, salaries, we search for salaries and we see what comes up. Now, we just got to find lists. Let's see, salary. Sometimes, let's see. You have to just play around. Okay, so here we have instruction, and we get some numbers, and you just start playing around. You just start seeing what you see, and you're going to start to be overwhelmed. It's like, well, what is this stuff? Oh my God, how am I supposed to make sense of any of this? Well, just remember, equality of intelligence. And one more sort of financial pun that I want to mention here is I'm going to stop sharing so that we can start working together. I want you to continually take an assets approach when you're working with these documents. What do I mean by that? I mean that we're not thinking about deficits. We're not thinking about what you don't understand. If you're just focused on what you don't understand, you're never going to get anywhere. But just let yourself see these numbers, and you can control F stuff and see what you see and keep looking at it, and just like what sense you do make of it, what thoughts you do have of it, because you're going to have thoughts, you're going to have questions, right? And so I want you to assume the quality of intelligence. I want you to take an assets approach with yourself. I want us to make an incursion into the world of finance, because this is where all the crises come from. This is how schools close, people get fired, programs get cut, all the buildings are falling apart. These are the material conditions, the numbers that we have to follow to be able to do the analysis that's needed for our campaigns and to transform the system that needs transforming. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say, and I wanted to take the next 20 minutes or so and just give you an opportunity to use that worksheet, download it, try to start finding your school district, see what you find, and as soon as you have a question or you run into a little dead end, post a question there in the chat, and I'll try to help you out. Or if you have questions, this is an AMA. I'm calling it Studio AMA. Like we're in an artist studio. We're all working on something. We're all working on the analysis of our districts, and you can ask me questions, and we can help each other out. Okay, so go to it. As soon as someone has a question, you can pop it right in the chat. You could probably just come off mute too, frankly. We're a small enough group. What is the website? It is. I'm going to put it right back in the chat.
This is cool, Dave. Thank you. And hopefully y'all do this with your colleagues at work, parents, other people. This turns into a collective project.
Maybe I'll share my screen again when I start looking at Evergreen, and I'll just be poking around and people can poke around. And okay, let's see. Jennifer's saying, last time I filled out about 70% of the worksheet. How are you making sense of the climate risk score? I'm thinking of how to present this to others. It's a good question. I think it gives you a sense of how vulnerable this particular community is to climate change, and also like it sort of justifies why it is that we need a better financing system for schools that's going to not put as much carbon into the atmosphere. So I tend to think that there's a green way out of debt, which is to say using green banks and using green financing, public green financing, to fix up our buildings that are putting a ton of carbon into the atmosphere, but also they make it hard to breathe for teachers and students. There's mold, there's lead, there's asbestos poisoning, and I think that doing the climate score gives that sort of feeling, that sort of vibe. How can we access the school finance sheet? Okay, let me put the link back into the chat for you there. We put a link to it in the chat, and then you download it, Nathan.
Hey,
Okay, Andrew.
David.
Oh yeah, hi, Joshua.
Hi. I was just kind of wondering if you had an idea about ratios and where things fall. I've got, sort of tables and various stuff, and just trying to um, whether sort of e experience or intelligence you build up by looking at this repeatedly or looking at various documents.
Say the first part of your question again. Ratios?
The ratios between like interest and principal.
Oh, like what's the typical ratio between interest and principal?
Yeah, it's all pretty absurd.
That's fine. You're coming in and out of mute. I mean, essentially, the ratio of interest to principal is going to be that interest rate. And interest rates on school bonds tend to be around 4 or 5%. And it's unfortunate because it's a big category mistake. The municipal bond market is weird. It's like a way of creating resources and liquidity for public governments, but based on the private principle, to pun on principle. Okay, let's see.
Hey
Oh,
Dave,
Andrew.
can I make one point to Patrick about this really important question about leverage?
Yeah, go ahead. Answer that question.
Yeah, Patrick, this question, if everyone gets a chance to look at Patrick's question, this is ultimately what we're trying to do is like, how does this give us leverage when we go to negotiate contracts and other things for our schools? Um, I do want to point out, Patrick, that one thing that happened in Philadelphia just a couple weeks ago is that the union signed a new contract, but to pay for the new contract, the district had to take out a $1.5 billion loan that they're supposed to get reimbursed from the state on, but even if they do get reimbursed, they're going to end up paying $30 million into interest and fees. So like this is just a total scam that we need to be aware of. And I think one of the ways it gives leverage, Patrick, and there's many here, we could talk about bargaining for the common good type negotiation styles, but we could also say that if there was more tax revenue coming in, we'd be less reliant on Wall Street for debt. So in other words, the billionaires owe us. If they paid their fair share in taxes, we would have less debt, and that would obviously be important for all of us in terms of some of the benefits and other things we would get. But I think that question on leverage is perhaps the question here.
Looks like Lauren has a question. Do you want to go ahead, Lauren?
Yes, hi, thanks for doing this today.
Hello. Thank you
I'm
for joining
concerned
us.
I'm concerned about the finances in a district that alleges that there is no debt whatsoever, which seems to be the case. Because when I go to
Oh,
the Emma website that you just mentioned, the last record there is from 1985.
what district are we talking about?
We're talking about Neptune Township in New Jersey. So my question is whether there could be funding coming from the State Department of Education through, say, different line items that might be state specific. I'm thinking about like SDA funding for former Abbott school districts. Like, is there money tied up elsewhere that wouldn't be attached to the school district by name, but could come from an entity that I may not be aware of to look up?
That's interesting. So sometimes Emma can be tricky. And sometimes issuers have different pages that go back to different years. And so, but New Jersey, so every school district, it's important to be specific about the school districts that we're talking about, and every state and the relationship between the state and the school district can be different. In New Jersey, you have the school, I want to say it's the school, the SDA,
The
and
School Development Authority,
the School
yes.
Development Authority, and the Abbott districts and the non-Abbott districts. And the Abbott districts can get up to 100% of financing reimbursed by the state, but that is a designation that tends to fall on like higher poverty, more urban areas. But there are a number of Abbott districts, and so I'm wondering: is Neptune doesn't sound to me like an Abbott district, is it?
It is a former Abbott district, now known as an
Okay.
SDA district, correct?
Okay, right. SDA Abbott's the name of the Supreme Court case there in New Jersey. It created it. So yes, so as an SDA district, it might not have the same kinds of records that other districts have. However, that does not mean it doesn't have debt in the same way. It just might be listed somewhere else, and it might be in debt to the state somehow, or other kinds of issues. So we have to poke around. We have to poke around. I believe it's the New Jersey Educational Facilities Authority.
Thank you.
And now I want to look.
Yeah, so we're in a situation where we are having our taxes raised by over $4,000 per household this year to
Wow.
make up for the fact that we have reached sort of the end of their financial reserves. And they're alleging that the state does not have information about how the state bonded buildings in the town that are under their control, which means that the school board cannot sell them to try to counter tax liability on homeowners.
Wow.
And that's, I think, what I'm hoping to get out of this is like, how do I fact check what's coming from school board meetings and how can I support the dead ends that they're running into where they allege that there's missing information?
Yes.
So that this is a
Well,
very specific case, and I'll stop
it-
chatting so I don't really kind of like,
it's
take this
totally
down a
fine.
rabbit hole.
No, I think this is fine for everybody to hear because every case is particular. The one of the organizing problems of this kind of campaign and work that we're doing is that every single district has its own little terrain, right? And its own little history, set of protocols, norms. And so it's hard to generalize. And okay, so I became interested in your case and I found a few documents. I don't know if you were looking at them, but the issuer homepage is actually the Board of Education. I'm going to just throw things into the chat. It'll be for everyone. I don't know if you saw this page. There is a Neptune Board of Education city budget here, but it's a very strange city budget. I'm gonna keep putting stuff.
This is not my town. I live in
Oh, it's
Neptune
not.
Township, not Neptune City.
Ah, okay. Well, that'll do it. Okay, let's see.
Hey Dave, while you're looking for that, one thing that Lauren brought up was reserves. And Dave and I were at a debt institute this past weekend in Philadelphia. I think Josh, if that's the same Josh, was there too. And one thing we learned is that there's a lot of reserves out there that districts aren't touching because they want to maintain a certain credit rating. So they're actually keeping more in reserves than they're legally bound to do that. And one strategy would be how do you claw back those reserves instead of, underpaying teachers or making cuts? So this is another thing for folks to look into is like look at what your reserve situation is, find out what the legally required percentage of the budget you have to keep in reserves, and then find out if they're keeping more in the reserves than legally they have to, and start to ask questions about why they're doing that. This usually comes back down to this question of credit rating. One reason, at least.
Can I chime in there too, Jason? Because we talked about that at our school board meeting last week. There was conversation around how when you put money into reserves, it can be flagged in the school budget as being required for a specific purpose, such as capital improvements for buildings. And if
It's
it's coded
reserved.
in a certain way, they can't take it for any other reason. So that was interesting because like there is reserves showing, but not reserves that can be applied to the budget writ large. So that was a learning for me and for many people who came to the board meeting from the town.
Okay, so I did find Neptune Township as a municipality on Emma. And I did find the documents for the township. Now, let me ask you a question about Neptune Township. Is it a sending district? Is it a full K-12 system, or are there?
It is a full K-12 school district. And
K-12
I
school
believe
district.
it takes from other districts that send.
Oh, really? It's a receiving district.
I believe it's a receiving district, although I haven't lived here all that long. I'd want to fact check that to be 100%.
That's a New Jersey thing. Okay. So, I'm finding Neptune Township stuff for the town, and it's a long document. And what I would start to do is just Control F around education. I'm also seeing financial disclosures, and let me go back to this. Yes, I'm seeing an interesting financial disclosure from 2021 about capital stuff having to do with Monmouth County. So there might be a relationship to Monmouth County that might be interesting to look at as well. I start going down this stuff, but I'm going to stop myself because I see some other questions. But thank you for coming and asking. Patrick seems to have to go, and other people are connecting in the chat. Yeah, so at the end here, I'm going to make another plug, and I'm going to put the link into the chat. I don't know if people use Reddit, but I've thought that it has some potential to create, you know, an opportunity for people to kind of asynchronously be talking about this stuff and making sense of it. And so I started a subreddit called School Budget BS, and I put the link in there into the chat so that maybe if you keep looking on this stuff but you hit a snag, I'll look at it and I could respond, you know, so we might be able to have sort of dialogue on social media. The last thing I want to put into the chat for folks is a link tree that has a bunch of links for me and stuff that I linked to in this in the presentation. So you're saying I need to learn Reddit? Yeah, I guess not everybody knows. Not everybody knows Reddit. I find it helpful for very niche stuff like this. You know, I'm on the like bonds Reddit. You know, I start reading about bonds. Or if I, you know, have questions about any given thing. So we've still got, you know, we've still got 10 minutes and 27 people are on this call. Does anyone else have a question about the case they're looking at? Looks like we've had some interesting numbers coming out of Buffalo. Was it Buffalo? We looked at a case in New Jersey. Is anyone else either encountering something or want me to work something? Want me to work through anything with you?
I'd like to hear from Andrew if they're still on about the data they found that said you could. Andrew, why don't you share what you found? That to me is astounding.
Sure. First, my background, I'm a classroom teacher, but just finished my business certification. And I was surprised because
Nice.
my district, Greece, New York, is actually considered really solid compared to other districts in the region. So I was shocked to see that our total bond debt and interest is more than double our instructional budget. And so even though we're considered a very high leverage, healthy district financially, the system must be really unhealthy for a district like ours to be running such an extreme level of debt.
We just sit with that for just a minute. Like, this is wild, everyone. Like, I'm curious how many other districts have this reality. Andrew just told us that what is it, 149%? Go ahead.
Yes, yes. Our total debt that's owed is 149% of our instructional budget.
That's
And
wild.
we're considered a very healthy district financially.
Wow.
You know, it's interesting to consider this because, and this is something Jason and I have talked about before, a district can be highly in debt, but also can be quite extravagant. Comes from research, you know, that Jason has done. That is to say, if you have a lot of municipal revenue, a lot of taxable property within the boundaries of the school district that you can pay back your loans with, then you could be up to your eyeballs in debt, but you're able to pay it back. You're able to refinance it. You're seen as being very credit worthy, and that's the situation. But you're still up to your eyeballs in debt. And now, while that makes a certain kind of sense in the sort of business world of capitalism and stuff, and this is actually how the billionaires all hold their money, right? They hold it all in debt and so that they don't have to report on taxes. This is a public school district. Okay, so to subject the public school district to the same logic as the private sphere is, to me, it's sort of repulsive. It's reprehensible. It's not the way that school districts should be doing this, because what ends up happening is if there needs to be new initiatives, if there needs to be new spending, or if communities have certain kinds of demands, the school board and the superintendent look over to the business officer in the school district and say, can we do that? And the business officer says, no, we can't do that because it'll affect our credit rating and we have to pay back the debts and our debt payments. And I'm sorry, we can't do this thing that you want to do as a community. Okay. Now, of course, as soon as the casinos come asking, or as soon as the developers come asking, or now the data centers come asking, that becomes a different story, right? Suddenly now the school district has to be involved and can take on debt and all these things. So the debt itself, is an interesting thing to think about. To some degree, school districts need resources for big capital projects. And, there's some school districts are up to their eyeballs in debt and it's bad, and other districts are up to their eyeballs in debt and they seem to be able to manage it. But at any rate, that school district needs to be making these debt payments. And it has this huge impact on the possibilities and the horizons for school districts and what it means to do public education. This is supposed to be public education, but our horizons of possibility are severely limited by this, what they call the debt state. Okay, so it seems like Moira has a question. Curious what research you either are or dream of pairing this with for organizing around schools, for example, green schools, class size reduction, or many districts are facing school closings. How do we close the loop to translate to local fights? I think it's an excellent question. I'll give a quick answer to State 55. We've got 5 minutes left, and I want to tie things up. I hope this isn't the last time we're going to do this. And hopefully, people can see you on Reddit and other social media platforms. But what I like to talk about are green banks, because I think green banks are reverse charter schools. So even though they get money from the private sector, they're directing it for the public. And it puts the public back in charge of private credit flows for public infrastructure. And the more that we can orient school district finance towards green bank finance, and I think through school pensions, it's a way of reimagining what public credit for public schools means, so that it's not this odious debt, but rather, healthy debt. We could say carbon-free bonds of democracy in healthy school finance. That is to say, bonds. You could still issue bonds, okay, if we have this, but we want to be doing it for this public purpose, so that the public purse is not leaking billions of dollars out to these ruling class people for the public infrastructure. And so, one thing I talk about are the green banks, but bigger ideas are like a national investment authority, Green New Deal for schools. These are ways of trying to combat this, and these are things that you can do. So you say, translate to local fights. These are things we can do locally. Most states now have something like a green bank. And if there isn't a green bank, then there are green banks that work across state lines. And there are things that you can do that are not just the federal Green New Deal for schools, but what they call a Green New Deal for schools in spirit. And starting to fight on that terrain, I think, changes this conversation. It gets other people involved for a sort of constructive purpose.
Dave, can you also bring up, since it came up above, can you mention something when you talk about bonding for the common good?
Oh, yeah.
That's a nice
So,
idea.
yes, so this actually gets to Moira's question too. The thing is, the bond, so you know how teachers unions bargain for their contracts, right? They bargain for the salaries and the benefits, bread and butter issues, and then bargaining for the common good expands that to make it for the common good, not just for the teacher's good. So our idea is that bonds should be also negotiated for the common good. Bonds are a deal between the school district and Wall Street. We want to have that negotiation of that contract be more participatory, more democratic, and subject to collective deliberation, not just the bond referendum, which is typically how you get it. You usually hear, oh, you're going to vote on this bond, yes or no. But you had no say in what the structure of that bond was. Who is the underwriter? Who's the big bank that's making the loan? What's the interest rate? How did that get decided? Was the green bank involved? Who were the consultants and what were their fees? What's the credit rating and how was that decided? You get no say in that whatsoever. And bonding for the common good is opening up that process and making sure that these bond deals are, that there's a meaningful share in the thinking behind that bond by the people who are affected by the bond when it's done. And so that's another thing you can do at the local levels. You can try to make demands for transformative bonds for new processes. And this is something that we would want to see people to start organizing around.
We are going to wrap things up. Jennifer, Selena is doing a Jubilee School for us on December 2nd. And this is a nice segue, actually. We're going to announce our semester Jubilee School schedule in the next coming weeks. It's going to include more activities like this, including Selena Sue's work on budget justice. That's December 2nd. Mark your calendar now, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. But be on the lookout for a lot of different a lot of different programming from Debt Collective. David has given us an enormous tool analysis to work with here. Thank you so much, David, for your work and for presenting. This has been fantastic. Thank you all for engaging and for coming on a Friday night. Um, David, you want to close it out with a word, and before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone and, stay in touch. There's a link there for me, and, keep in touch with us. I'm happy to help, to weigh in. If you have a question about a document, email back and forth. This is what I like to do. So thank you again for listening, engaging with this, and solidarity. You are not alone, as we say here, the Debt Collective.
That's right. I was just gonna say you are not Alone and you are not Loan. So we will fight for different realities. Thank you, David. The recording will be on the website soon. Stay in touch with Debt Collective. We have an educator caucus. We have more Jubilee School coming, including another session from Dave. So have a good night, everybody,
Take
and
care.
cheers to
Have a good weekend.
have a drink to the resistance. Hang in there, everybody.
TGIF.